For the past couple of videos, I've been talking about this story and how they shape how we see and perceive and understand. And in reality, when God brought Israel out of Egypt, He didn't just bring them into the promised land, He brought them into the wilderness. Now, this wilderness could be understood maybe in some terminology we might use today. We might call it deconstruction, where He is deconstructing the model of Egypt, the model of that empire, so that He can bring them into His mountain and establish another kingdom, another way of relationship, not only with God Himself, but with each other. Now, a lot of us have been taught to fear this deconstruction. And it's like asking questions is the first step to losing God. I was taught that you never question God. But what if none of that is true? What if you didn't lose God at all? They didn't lose God in the wilderness. What if you lost a version of God that was never real? Remember, they wanted to go back, and that's hard because we become comfortable, even though we were slaves over there. Because deception doesn't feel like deception. It feels like discipline. It feels like devotion. It feels like doctrine. It feels like faith until the truth shows up. You remember the truth has a name. Jesus says, I am the truth. Now in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, I will shake not only the earth, but also heaven, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. So maybe what you're feeling, if you're going through some of this wilderness deconstruction, maybe what you're feeling is not loss, maybe it's the shaking. And God is not tearing down your faith here. He's removing what cannot stand. That's what the verse says, so that whatever can be shaken may fall away, that the kingdom will be there. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, each one's work will be revealed. It will be tested by fire. There's other verses that talk about testing. What are we talking about? Testing. We've often thought about that as something future, right? Testing. One of these days you're going to be judged. But what if that fire has already been revealed? And if you want to see what survives the fire, my friends, look at the cross, because that cross is that fire, if you can hear that. The cross is where everything is tested. You test it, when John talked about test everything, prove it, test it by the cross. Every belief, every expectation, every story, and most of it, believe it or not, doesn't survive. And the more attached you are, the more you'll suffer loss, because the cross reveals God is not who we thought He was. He does not conquer through violence. He does not rule through domination. He does not save through power like missiles and dominations and Pax Romana. The cross doesn't just save you, it confronts you. In Luke's gospel, this is after the cross, Luke 24, after Jesus is crucified and He's risen, the disciples are in this terrible place. They're on their road to Emmaus. Jesus comes alongside and they said, we had hope. That line tells you everything. They had a story. They had an idea of a warrior king, a conquering Messiah. But the cross burned that story, my friends, to the ground. But we had hope. We thought He was going to come and put the Romans down and put us up. They even asked, can we sit on the right hand and the left hand? They didn't just lose hope. They lost the wrong story. There has always been conflict. Conflict between the way of empire and the way of God. Now, empires, and we talk a lot about empires here because I want you to see this. Empires are built on power, control, exclusion, fear, protecting what's ours, blame, scapegoating. But Jesus comes on the scene preaching a kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Love your enemies, serve the least, lay down your life. And the cross proves that. God is not like empire. He doesn't crush his enemies. He dies for them. Now, somewhere along the lines, we've mixed the stories and we've mixed the two and mingled the two. We're always warned about that. We took the way of Jesus and we blended it with the way of power. We called control conviction. We called fear faith. We called influence authority. And sometimes we didn't even realize it. I mean, go back to Genesis. Abraham climbed a mountain thinking he understood God, thinking he understood sacrifice. He knew what it was all about. But what happened right in the middle of the act? God stopped him because God was not like the gods of the land of Ur, the land of the Chaldeans, where he come from. And what happened? What died on that mountain was not Isaac, but Abraham's old understanding of God. Now, this deconstruction model goes all the way through Scripture. Paul, Saul of Tarsus, thought he was serving God. He had letters, and he was zealous, and he was committed, he was certain, but he was operating in a system of power. Then Jesus meets him on the road to Damascus, and everything Paul knew falls apart. Remember, he's blind for 3 days. Peter, you remember Peter jumps up and says, I will never deny you. I'll even go into death. And then, you know what happened? Why? Because his understanding of strength could not survive the cross. You know, he's the one that pulls the sword out, and everybody talks about the sword and cuts Malchus's ear off. Jesus says, put away the sword. He that lives by the sword will die by the sword. So deconstruction. Now here you are with pieces of your belief system all over the floor. I thought it was this. I thought church was supposed to be this, and it's a shambles, and you're asking, was any of this real? Can I even trust this anymore? And sometimes you're mad, sometimes you're empty. Some of you aren't really mad at God. You're hurt, and I understand that because you trusted people whom you thought spoke for God, and they spoke so confidently, and you thought with raised voices that everything they said was true. Jeremiah warns us about all that. And no one told you some of what you were taught was not even in the Bible. You know, I often ask people that, I wonder where that is in the Bible. But it was control dressed up like conviction. It was fear that was framed as faith, and manipulation masquerading as ministry. That's called witchcraft, by the way. And when it all falls apart, it feels like betrayal. Now, when you find yourself there, this is, go back to the wilderness. You have a choice. Do I rebuild or do I retreat? Do I try to go back to Egypt? Do I lean in or do I leave? You can, and here's a warning, you can deconstruct into emptiness or into intimacy. Now, I want you to hear this clearly. If what you lost could not survive the truth, it couldn't stand the test of the cross, the fire of God, then, my friends, it was not God. And know this, Jesus is not afraid of your questions. He's not offended, believe this or not, by your doubts. He is waiting on the other side of them saying, now that all that noise is gone, can we finally talk?